Okay, so, oh wait, sorry. Oh, no. I want to talk about the good death. My core message is that hold on, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, so my core message is that in China, death can be happy because it's a social event which strengthens rather than severs existing relationships. And my argument unfolds like in three parts. So first, interacting with the dead in the context of family lineage rituals is a regular part of life in China today. Second, people talk about preparing for one's funeral as a good and happy thing. And third, family, specifically relationships with parents, is central for the young and the urban. So interacting with death. In the home, a lot of people have family shrines. For example, this 21-year-old, she lives with her mother. You can see on the left there, she's got a photograph of her father who died a little bit more than 2 years ago, and an incense burner and some candles. And she was telling me how she and her mother did the morning rituals. So for this first 7 days, they did offerings, and then it was once a month, and then there was a milestone at 100 days, and then for the first 3 years, every year they did something, or you do something. And then at the end of 3 years, she was saying, and then he'll go up in there. So let's see, there. So you can see on the right there, that's an alcove in her living room where there is the character Fu behind it. And that's where people have the photographs or a visual representation of the deceased, where they'll be making offerings, whom they'll be making offerings to. But it's not only just, okay, after 3 years, we're done. Throughout the year then, people visit graves and make offerings to their deceased family at these different times. So at New Year, all the family gets together, and it's a good time for people to go, and so they usually go and visit. But then there are all these other times too, including the official tomb sweeping holiday, which is an official holiday. In a 2009 survey, they found that 70% of the population have been grave sweeping sometime during the past year. So the tomb sweeping holiday itself, as I said, is now a public holiday since 2008. And in 2012, the official numbers were that 520 million people went out and did this on the holiday, which is 37% of the population. In my field work, though, I think the numbers are higher because people were telling me, oh, well, it's way too crowded on the day of. So we go, we already went, and it's like 2 weeks in advance. And you can see in the picture, it is pretty crowded. So people try to go sometime, in that time, but it's not necessarily on that day. So I think the numbers are probably higher than that. So what are people doing when they're going tomb sweeping? Well, last April, I observed and participated in one family's visit to their graves during the tomb sweeping holiday, Qingmingjie, in a suburb of Chengdu in Sichuan. So the family got together in the morning, and then they drove from the city to the village where the graves are, and they were cleaning the gravesite, and they're offering the food, which is chicken and pork, and then water, and then they were burning paper money. So let me show you what they were doing. Did you have sound? Okay. So, there they are, they're getting the paper money ready, right? And you can see kind of the different generations all being represented. This is a...
新型的冥币，你看100元
100元
很搞笑。
So, there are different kinds of money, like the strips and then the other thing that they were preparing. And then the new kind of money he's showing me. He thought it was funny. He said, isn't that funny? Because he said, instead of Mao's picture being on the bill, it's the god of the underworld. So, it's, he thought that was funny.
笑吧，自己写。
对，西装还有衬衣、领带一套，还有电话，因为以前有一个。
So, and then they're burning like paper clothing. So that was a picture of a Western suit that they're burning for Grandpa. So Grandpa's going to get it on the other side. And they're saying, oh, look, there's a leather shoes and a cell phone, which was a Samsung. We were like, wait, is it iPhone or Samsung? We're looking closer. Okay, it's a Samsung. And then she was telling me a story here of
就是有一个很幽默的段子，就是说一个专门卖这种冥币的一个商贩，他就给一个买东西的人说，哎，你给你老爸买个手机，他就好吧，那我买了。然后他说你还要买一个充电器，然后那个人说我为什么要买充电器呢？然后老板就说你如果不买充电器，他会来找你，他会问你要。
再听就乖乖去买。
Right, so she told the story about how she's buying these things to burn for the grandpa or the deceased, and the owner says, well, if you're going to get the cell phone, you got to get the cell phone charger. And she's like, well, why? And she said, well, because if you don't, he's going to come looking for the charger. And so this is kind of part of what's going on. And here we have the auntie who's starting to talk to the grandpa.
就叫他们祖先现在回来享用这些贡品，
So you can hear her. She says, "Oh, come use
然后
this
保佑
stuff,
后辈子孙
protect the descendants."
become lucky。
你们妈就今天给你们上坟了，
Here we
你们
are.
妈就
We're
你们妈
visiting
就
the grave.
都在这儿吃，跟我妈妈，你们妈就都在这儿吃，
叫他们都在这儿吃来喝，
你们妈在这儿拿钱，拿了钱嘛，
在这儿来拿
Take the
钱。
money.
拿到钱嘛，你们就去耍，你们嘛看到我们嘛都看到这些孙儿孙女儿，
Look,
这
everybody's
些
here.
外孙女些嘛，咋子
Your grandchildren are here.
嬷都在这儿去嘛，你们
看到我们大家都在这儿
你们是姻缘。
然后叫他他们悄悄的来享用贡品，就悄悄的走，不要不要来打扰这个活着的人，因为这个阴间的人打扰着活着的人，就死去的人死者这个灵魂不能打扰我们，打扰我们就会生病这些。
Okay, use the things, but don't
还
hurt
有
us.
高德亮。
And so she keeps talking. Now they're burning the
要
paper
保佑
money.
哎，
这个家族嘛，你都
对，
要保佑，保
Protect
佑
us.
嘛。一年嘛，都多挣点钱，生意好点。
Let us make a little money.
是来，
Okay.
保佑你，
要让这个祖先保佑我们涛涛里所有的人。
保佑你上班嘛平平安安的，嘛工作顺序，保佑员工嘛成绩好。
所以现在
And
就让
let him have good
我
grades.
保
Let my
佑我成绩
grandson
好
have。good grades.
祈祷。
So you can see all the different generations. The little girl is, participating too. And what's interesting about tomb sweeping is that it brings together these sort of different worlds that people inhabit. So there's at least two worlds going on here. So one is sort of a physical science world, in which deceased people can't eat stuff, right? But then there's another world here that is about the family and how central it is and how important it is to reaffirm the lineage and everyone's place in it. So during the normal course of life, these things don't necessarily intersect, but at special times or at certain times during the year, or when they're making offerings, they do intersect in the form of doing these things and in the form of these jokes, right? Where there's actually the ambiguity of both things existing can kind of come together in the joke, and they don't actually necessarily need to resolve it. One of the interesting things about it is, so I was like kind of, so do you think he gets the cell phone charger on the other side or not? And people didn't necessarily, it doesn't matter actually whether they believe and they don't believe at the same time. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so what is this good death then? One of the interesting things that I saw was that people talk about preparing their own burial clothes as a happy thing. And you can see here, this is a friend of, or a person that I became friends with, showing me her little package of burial clothes.
我来看嘿，我来看哈。
So here we go. She's going to show us her clothes.
無啊，要滴無啊？
That's her hat.
哦，
Jim Tao, a pillow.
配，真水啊！褲，嘿，
Her pants. One of the interesting things is everybody's like happy about this stuff, right? And he's like, oh, these are really nice. These are beautiful shoes. And the friends are like admiring it. This is her purse. She's gonna wear.
Bị chèn hả? Không phải bị chèn dê, không phải bị chèn dê.
She's gonna wear all these clothes, like all on
内
top
面
of
前
each
黑，
other.
外口前黑。哦，这嘞，这个米糕啊，水
Okay,
哦。
so these are her earrings.
相片尾戏的相片给我看看。
And she's got her portrait all set up already.
准备了，
哦，所以两准备好唔是，个能看哦。
She wanted to show us
听你这，
how the earrings look.
啊，弟娘要冲面镜，你讲伊，啊，这要冲下底啦。
这个挂着来。
哈，真水哦。
没有，要不冲面镜这500，变啦。
水哦，水哦，水哦。
啊，你快给大呗。
有啊，有 get 到
Finally,
咯。
this guy says, that means, isn't this valuable? Doesn't this have value? She's getting prepared, you know? She's got it all prepared. Isn't that great? Okay, so why is this such a happy thing? Well, so this woman said, it's a happy thing. Everybody does it. I've had mine for more than 10 years. It turns out that someone with a well-ordered, meaningful, and noble life can go about preparing their burial clothes in this way. One man in his mid-20s said, if people don't prepare their burial clothes, people would feel like you're not 幸福. You're going to the next life and you're not even preparing it. People would feel like you're kind of a failure. 失败. So not only do people prepare their own burial clothes, but children prepare burial clothes for their parents. And that is thought of as this really nice thing to do. This is a picture of a man who used to be a party cadre in Yunnan. And he was telling about how when he retired, he kind of mentioned it kind of to his kids. And then so the next New Year's, his daughters got together and bought him a coffin. And then his son was like, oh, well, I have to contribute something too. So he got burial clothes made for him and his wife. So when the burial clothes were done, he took them, showed them to his parents, and then they showed them to the whole village because this is to show that he is a filial son and he's fulfilled his duties. His parents were so proud of this. But one thing I do want to note that it's not all rainbows and unicorns. You know, it's not so carefree, I guess, in the sense that there were little rules that people had about their burial clothes. And you can see that there's an element of fear. So for example, one grandson got a huge spanking because he was playing he found the burial clothes at the bottom of the closet of his grandfather. And some people have their clothes stored at a temple because they figure, well, you know, if the monks are kind of chanting nearby, maybe they'll have a little more good luck, i.e. not a premature death. So what's interesting is that the happiness and anxiety is visible. So the family lineage is important and it's reinforced. And even in what the young people were telling me, they talked about the family and the sort of the lineage, especially their relationships with their parents. So when I asked them, tell me about someone who's happy, one of the common answers was, my roommate. Oh, well, why do you say she's happy? Well, because she has a good relationship with her parents. Oh, okay. So for example, this young woman on the left, she had the opposite. So she began her life story telling me about how her parents left her when she was just a baby with her grandparents, went all the way to Guangdong to make money. And when they came to visit, she didn't even recognize them because she didn't know them. And when I asked her, tell me an example of somebody who's really unhappy, has had an unhappy life, she told me about a friend who was left by the side of a river as a baby. So you can see the kind of the parallel there. But the interesting thing is that during our interview, she got a phone call. So it was from her mom. And then I was like, oh, so what did she say? Oh, she wanted to know if I needed money. Oh, okay. So does she call often? Not really. I mean, every few days or so. Which I thought was hilarious because to me that that's a pretty good relationship. She's calling to ask if you need money every 3 days. That's not so bad. But she kept talking about how bitter she was and you know, how they didn't have a good relationship. On the right is a young man who is now working as a hotel clerk. And he was very interesting too because he said, oh, well, my life is 95% happy. Oh, okay, why? Oh, well, because I got away from the village, I'm teaching myself English, I've got these big plans, and he had the big plans, and he was you know, doing all these things. And then, so what was the 5% unhappy? Well, his parents want him to just get married and like go home and have a baby. Oh, okay. But what was interesting, he called it 5%, but he talked about how that 5% could overshadow his 95%. So even though he disagreed with his parents, it still figured very prominently in his thoughts about, I don't know, his career and his life and what he was supposed to do. So my final example of young people, this is a graduate student in anthropology with his father. And we were asking him, you know, so we asked the father, what do you hope for? And his dad just kind of looked meaningfully at his son and said, he knows what I hope for. So it turned out the student kind of had these dreams for academia, but then his parents just wanted him to go home and have a baby and live with them so they could take care of the baby. And so he was telling me, the student, the difference between my dad's idea of a good life, Hao Ming, and mine is that I can do what I want to do in mine. Also travel or go somewhere if I want. I don't know if I can stay with him the way he wants. Filial means to stay here and be with him. I can't do it. But then in mid-paragraph or mid-stream of conversation, he said, well, in the future I might be here, because we were in their home. I'll figure out a way. Like other people my age, they live at their home, at home with their parents. A lot of them do it. Then he switched back again. But I don't want to. I couldn't stand it. So Buliao. After getting married, the son and daughter-in-law move in with their parents, but I won't do it. But we spent 2 days together, and at the end of the second day, we had dinner, and I said, so what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'll probably come back home and live with my parents and get married and have a baby, and they'll take care of it. So you can see the anxiety and the sort of this conflict that he was struggling with. Okay, so just to recap, my argument is that interacting with the dead in the context of family lineage rituals is a regular part of life in China today, and that people talk about preparing for one's funeral as a good and happy thing, and that 3, family, specifically relationships with parents, is central for the young and the urban. So the message is that in China, death can be a happy thing because it is a social event which strengthens rather than severs existing relationships. A few implications. One, my fieldwork in China shows that where death is frequently reinforced as a social phenomenon, where it's meaningful and represents a next step towards something that's continuous with one's social relationships, people can feel calm and even happy about it. The first implication is that American doctors say that people don't know how to die in the US because people endure painful and pointless medical procedures for just a tiny chance for a few days of extra life. We spend a lot of resources and time just delaying the inevitable, and then they're often expected to just make their own peace by themselves in the last days or hours of their lives. This is, you know, a common critique that are made, and some people say, well, it's because it's a fee-for-service system and the doctors are trying to make money. But I wonder if there's another reason. Perhaps understanding death in the asocial way in which we do makes it difficult for people to die a good death. And also, misunderstanding death as a solitary activity can make it hard for the living to grieve. The second thing is that happiness is a social phenomenon. What I talk about here is, you know, this rituals that are embedded in the fabric of life that people do together, which then leads to the idea of a good and happy death. I don't think that we can study happiness at the level of just measuring them as, you know, individuals and whether they are happy. I think we have to see what people are doing in societies or groups as a whole. And then third, last implication, I think that it shows that our categories for religion, as in Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, are not quite enough for understanding these things that are very, very important to people, that give them meaning, that even give a cosmological explanation, that order people's lives. Because the things that I'm talking about here are not a professed belief, it's not membership in an institution, it's stuff that people do as a family together. Okay, thank you.